Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Jennifer Bowman. She, her, hers pronouns. I'm coming to you from the ancestral land of the Atacapa Eshok Nation in what is now known as Houston, Texas. And I'm the Director of Music Education at the Kennedy Center. And it's my pleasure to host this conversation here at SphinxConnect, which is a conference I have just enjoyed being a part of in person, but I'm happy that we're able to come together on this topic of unity for the conference this year, even in a virtual realm. So we're here today to talk about artful resilience. And I want to quickly introduce our panel, but just to let you know kind of what our goals are for this conversation, we're going to be identifying striking examples of innovation during the pandemic, examining how teaching artists and the people who bring more artists into our community and ambassadors have continued to serve and pivot during these times. And we're going to share practices that may revolutionize our field, which we already know has been altered in many ways, and how they can be adopted in our year of new normal. So I want to welcome our really wonderful panel of guests. First, we have violist Leslie DeShazor, here with us. Leslie, it's really nice to have you. And then cellist Tommy Mesa. I'm really happy to have you, Tommy. And violinist Elena Urioste. Y'all, I practiced this and I still messed it up. Elena Urioste. So we're really happy to have you today. Can you all just tell us first where you are in the world, just so our audience knows that?
I'm in Detroit, Michigan.
Great. Tommy, what about you?
Oh, I'm in Miami, Florida.
Great. And Elena?
I'm in London, England.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us. So I summoned the spirits of panel facilitators before me and really looked up the definitions of the words for the title of our session today, and was really struck by the definition of resilience at this time. We've gone through a lot in 2020. And the definition talks about that resilience follows loss and difficulty. And I feel that before we talk about kind of the new normal and the things that we were able to do with our art, I'm wondering if you are all comfortable sharing, what you as an artist really lost in 2020, or if there was a moment when you fully realized the effect that the global pandemic had on your work and your artistic practice. I'm going to start with Leslie.
I think I speak for all of us when I say income. Lost a lot of income. I think for me, I didn't even want to really think about it at first for a long time because just the reality of it was too grim. Um, but more than that, like we all have this physical idea of kind of like where we are in space and time. I feel like mentally, a lot of us kind of lost our bearings, like we just don't mentally know where we are in space and time because what we normally do just kind of was like ripped from us so abruptly. So yeah, those are the two things. And for me, the defining moment of like the real true difficulty of it was October. That's when it really hit me.
Elena, do you want to respond to that as well?
Sure. Yes, I definitely lost a lot of income. Saw my concert calendar depleted overnight, basically. Um, but I think I'm not sure whether, if I'm being totally honest, whether I've still kind of comprehended what's happened, or I'm not sure that the loss has fully dawned on me. What I have realized is that I'm someone who's actually not great at sitting with loss of any sort, and my brain just sort of leaps into action. I tend to want to keep moving in a time of crisis or uncertainty. So I definitely made a bunch of plans, ranging from extremely frivolous to actually unexpectedly long lasting, without kind of realizing what had happened. So, yeah, I'm waiting for the like tragedy of it to hit still. And I'm sure it will. And, I definitely have times of anxiety like everyone else, but my defense mechanism is just to kind of barrel ahead, I would say.
I definitely feel you on that. And I think just as a person who supports artists and who supports young people who want to become artists, I've really missed having that direct connection to young people, the teenagers, to the college students that we work with. It's just really difficult to be able to tell them you're okay through a screen. So, you know, for me personally, it's just someone who loves artists. That's the thing I'm missing the most right now. Tommy, what about you? What are you thinking?
Yeah, all of the above. And I guess just to add to that, just the loss of human interaction. And that includes the concerts, right? That includes the sharing process in a concert hall and afterwards and before and with the musicians. And I mean, I don't know. I feel like I'm a part-time cellist, full-time like socializer in some ways. Like I feel like I just love that part of it and the traveling and the seeing the new places. And yeah, I mean, as soon as the tours started getting canceled, and the Sphinx Virtuosi tour, and then I had a tour in China that was canceled like right away, and it was just like a sort of moment where you're like, oh, okay, so these aren't just like one-off concerts being canceled. They're like a lot of ones in succession being canceled, and that was like right around maybe once in April and another one in October, because in October we were sort of not sure if we were going to have a half season, and then it sort of just went nope. So yeah, those were the two big months of cancellations.
But I'm glad that you are the group of three to talk to, because I know that you've done a lot this year, even with all of these cancellations, even with all of this loss. And I also want to encourage the audience to read more about our panelists, their bios. You can see it there on the page and read more about them. So definitely check that out. Now all three of you talked a lot about income, and yes, you should, because that was a huge part of 2020. And I work for a performing arts center, and I know that a lot of times our industry, the classical music, really rely on our big institutions as pillars and places where we have a place to create. But many of them shut down in March, enacted force majeure clauses all over the place. There was, it's in the news, people knew that. But really at that time when our big organizations couldn't come through, our individual artists and smaller organizations really stepped in, or were they just given more space to step in to fill that void? So, I'm wondering for you at this time, do you feel like there's an important lesson for big arts organizations, individual artists, smaller organizations to learn about how we, take care, support, work with our artists in the future after having experienced that? Let's start with Elena.
Yeah, so, okay, I'm going to try and say this without, I mean no offense to organizations or management companies or any person or institution in the music industry that obviously gives platform to artists. So if I do offend anyone, I'm really sorry. I don't mean it. But I have actually learned that artists have an incredible amount of power, which is usually not harnessed to its fullest extent. Obviously, we've all been on the internet like nonstop for this past year, and that is the biggest platform there is, basically. And I've just been floored by the content and the absolute innovation that's come from my colleagues, from people I've never met, from really young, inexperienced artists, and very well-known people. And I hope that we come away from this with just greater respect and appreciation for artists and the power that they have to actually make us feel stuff. I think if any of us stop and consider what has really gotten us through this time, inevitably a lot of us will say films, music, TV, you know, any art. And it's not necessarily the venues or the facilitators who are making it. It's people, it's humans, it is the musicians and artists themselves. So with regard to what institutions and venues can learn from that, I hope that moving forward, artists feel less beholden. And I don't mean this in a bad way. I think obviously there are things that we cannot do on our own. We can't, and there's nothing ever that will replicate the experience of making live music in a hall in a beautiful space. There's just it's the most magical thing in the world, and I miss it like every single day. But I think that artists should know that they don't need that in order to communicate with a lot of people around the world, to do what they love, to get a message across. Like we're doing it right now on Zoom. So I think there are a lot of ways that we as artists can be more creative, feel more empowered and emboldened to do it on our own without, you know, a specific platform that we've been raised to think that we require. And I also hope that moving forward, the conversations between artist and institution are more symbiotic. It's not the artist sort of saying yes just because they're so grateful to be asked. You know, asking for what we need, for what we actually really want to do. Hopefully, have the institutions respect that and be inspired. I just hope it's more of a conversation rather than we'd like to hire you for this. Okay. You know, just feeling like we're stuck in our roles. And also something that I think that organizations and institutions can maybe start to adopt is not feeling like everything needs to be in place and perfect and figured out before taking a risk. I think a lot of artists in the pandemic has just thought, well, let's give this a whirl. I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm going to try this, and you know, something beautiful kind of comes out of it by accident. I hope that all sort of parts of the music industry can just try that, because what's the worst that can happen? Like, you don't do it again if it doesn't work out. But it doesn't all have to be like totally curated and tied up in a bow for something to be effective.
That's a word, Elena. Tommy, do you want to respond to that as well?
Well, Elena, there's not much more I can add to that. That was pretty complete. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to reflect on how creative people have been during this time, and it does set the tone. I hope it sets the tone going forward for what artists want to create, with the level of expectation of creation of themselves, and like, what can I do now that, you know, I can't do anything in a concert hall? Like, I'm just going to go crazy, right? Like, there are like certain things that you're like, I've always wanted to do this, now I'm going to do it. And so when concert halls open, it would be interesting to see, you know, how much more adventurous things can get, you know, or whether presenters, whether managers, because managers also make, you know, repertoire recommendations. And I mean, whether people can really commit to this idea of just total freedom. I don't know. It's interesting. I loved your reaction, Elena, because like, I think halfway through the question, I realized I was like, do I actually know what this question is about? No. And then you like totally like, yeah, like you said a lot of awesome stuff. I just, you know, I learned a lot.
To be fair, a lot of the time I start talking without really knowing whether I've understood the question. But...
yeah, no, that was great. So thank you, Jennifer, for that question. I hope that that happens, that there is sort of a freedom and a sort of commitment to that idea going forward with something that we've set.
Yeah, great, Tommy. Leslie, what about you? What are your feelings on that?
I definitely think Elena captured most of it. I think for myself personally, I have been forced to start doing more things on my own. So unlike Elena, I'm not like a soloist necessarily. I've done a lot of like sideman kind of work, you know, playing in pits, playing in orchestra sections, getting called for the gig, you know. I haven't really forced myself to do a lot of breakout things on my own. And it's, even though the need has always been there nagging at me, like, stop waiting on this, or, you know, getting the call, always like create for yourself. So this pandemic has given me an opportunity to do that, and I'm grateful for it. The other thing that I think on the flip side is we as artists frequently feel a little pushed by the organizations sometimes. But I think we, or me personally, I don't think I realize how much was taken care of, also by the organizations. So, when you're planning your own content, you got to be in charge of your visual, your sound, what you're going to play, your programming, getting in touch with your audience, selling your own tickets. Like, I want to just go kiss all the sound people and all the people who sell the tickets and all the people who promote, because it's like, I know they did it. I come in with my instrument, sit down in my chair, play. Boom. Like, that's easy. Just practice my part. But when you have to practice your part and also handle all of those things like the inner working, it's no joke. So I personally feel like I've grown a greater appreciation for a lot of the people behind the scenes too. The staff who work so hard to get the artists comfortable, the people who work to just make sure we all have our chairs in the right places, make sure the stage is clean, make sure the bathrooms are functional, all these things that like we walk into a space and we just take for granted because it's always been there, it's always been done. I also think that I've had to have some conversations with some people that I work for in organizations about teaching and how we're going to like kind of adjust or shift in this new thing. And there has definitely been a greater need more than ever to communicate. I think most of us felt like there was never enough communication. When communication did happen, it was frequently too late. It was like the band-aid on the gushing wound sort of situation. But I know we've all been Zooming ourselves to death in meetings, but we realized the need to meet and communicate because we're in uncharted territory. And I think it's fair to assume that some things are not going to go back. I think some of these things that we've had to adapt to, some of them are going to stick. And we need to all be prepared for that. So the communication between organizations and artists definitely has opened, and I hope it stays that way.
And Leslie, I'm sure that all the front of house, back of house, backstage people are like cheering you on from their homes right now as they're listening in. Kind of a follow-up question, because I think you all talked a little bit about just the surprise of, dealing with everything during this time. Obviously, no one expected any of this to happen, but is there is there something about how you've responded to all of this that really surprised you about yourselves? Like I've talked with colleagues about May, June, July, and there was just like this fire. It was a little bit of anger about things that were happening in the world, but this just kind of fire in my belly that just made me a little bit more blunt than I typically am. Is there something in the way that you've responded that really surprised you, or something you found in yourself that helped you get through the year? Tommy, we start with you, or Leslie, or if you want to go.
I can start unless Leslie you want to. It's a good question. I I sort of went through a process, like probably everybody, of is it really going to last that long? Let's hope it doesn't. And then when it did, longer and longer and longer, you sort of start going through a process of grieving and denial and like all these things that you're just sort of like, okay. And I don't know, like there were times where it was really bad from my own mental state of, like, what do I do? Like, is this really worth it? To, I'm going to do this. I have to do this, like it was a huge range, as I'm sure a lot of people can relate to, but, sort of like Elena said in the beginning, which is like, there is that thing in me that's like, I gotta be doing something. Like, I don't know what it is, but I just have to do something to make this time valuable. And that's when I just started commissioning. I started commissioning through Astral Artists. And, I figured, during this time, like I might as well harness a lot of this frustration that people are feeling. And a good friend of mine named Andrea Casarubios, she's a cellist. She knows the cello inside and out. And she writes incredible music. And so I asked her to do a sort of song of isolation. And what came out was like a sort of this most gorgeous thing I've ever heard, like absolutely stunning music that I was just so glad to have had the opportunity to like give her that platform and for her to like, really channel a lot of that into it. So like that to me was such a, like, you know, a silver lining in all of this is like, you know, and then I commissioned 2 other people, Carlos Simon, who's one of the Medal of Excellence winners this year, and yeah, and Stephanie Ann Boyd. It's wonderful. So I you know, with commissioning, it's sort of been like my outlet of, okay, like here are a bunch of like frustrated composers just like us. Might as well have them like shoot all of that energy into something, and maybe something, you know, great will come out of it. So yeah, so that was my experience. But yeah, I mean, other than the music stuff, you know, it's still up and down, but things are looking more positive these days. So
I would say maybe not so much of a surprise, but like kind of a confirmation of myself. I'm so social. Um, I did not realize how much I need the energy of other people when I do things. So, doing concerts online when it's just you and a camera and a mic, and it's so awkward. so, so I started doing neighborhood concerts. I did like 4 concerts for my neighborhood. And I did some like discussions on Facebook, some chat rooms about some of the political things and social things that were happening. I realized how much I really need like human interaction to feel normal, for lack of a better word. Um, you know, because when you're just, that whole idea of taking things for granted, you know, like the whole thing with the back of house, front of house thing. Like I'm always around energetic, cool kids, you know, I'm always around musicians. We already know that's a whole bunch of fun and nonsense, right? So we're always in these situations where we get to just be who we are, especially musicians. I think we probably have that advantage over some people in other professions. Um, then when you're home, and obviously I have my family, you know, but that interaction that I get, that energy I get from an audience, that energy I get from the students when I teach, I didn't realize how vital that was for me to thrive. So this has been a major like adjustment for me. Like sometimes when I'm sitting at the computer teaching, I think I put it in my story yesterday. I feel like I'm talking to myself. You know, it's like I'm just looking at my own face for like hours and hours and hours every day. But yeah, I'm just like way more social than I ever knew that I was. Yeah.
Elena, what are you thinking?
I actually have a tiny tip for playing concerts to a phone. I've actually found that it's incredibly helpful to bring some stuffed animals into the room. Just it's so cute, and they're like quieter than people, and yeah, it just like it makes me happy. So if that's helpful for anyone, you can take that with you. In terms of sort of surprise realizations I've had over the past year, I actually think I've gotten much better at saying no, and also realizing my worth. I can't tell you how many. So for anyone who doesn't know, I did a big ridiculous video project with my husband. We released a total of 88 videos over the course of the first period of lockdown, totally like for our own selfish enjoyment. But then we got a lot of requests from people asking us to make videos to like highlight the plight of the struggling musician, like on top of this. And I was like, no, that's so stupid for so many reasons. Like, take whatever you want that's already there, please. Like, we'd love for you to share that. But how can you be asking me to do this thing which goes against the point you're trying to? It was just crazy. And like, that's sort of an extreme example, but I did get a lot, I think, better at sort of prioritizing what it was that I wanted to do, what I had time and energy for. Whereas probably a couple years ago, I would have said yes to everything just because I don't like making people unhappy. So I think I've gotten, with practice, it's definitely like a muscle that I've had to flex, gotten a little better at saying no when something doesn't resonate with me. And then kind of on the flip side of that, if I am asked to do something that, you know, wasn't my own idea, I think this has probably been an important lesson for a lot of particularly freelance musicians like myself. Something that we've had to learn, particularly this last year, is like asking for what you need, like with regard to money and all sorts of other things. But this is maybe opening up another can of worms, but all of the panel conversations and sort of roundtable discussions that started cropping up in June, July, for a lot of these organizations, I was like, what you're asking us to do is consulting work. And like in any other field, people charge a lot of money for that. So just starting to know what are things that you want to do, like out of the goodness of your own heart because you believe in it, and things that are actually requiring a lot of time and energy and need some sort of compensation. So I think those have been big lessons for me this year.
Those are really good lessons for everybody. And I'm really happy you brought up the panel conversations. I mentioned that in another discussion I had in November, where I basically told the audience that these artists just want to work and they want to create. They don't necessarily always want to share their feelings and their thoughts about the world. So just give them space to do that and compensate them. It's like super important and very helpful. That's a really good segue into just thinking about, everything that was happening on top of the global pandemic in 2020, because we needed more to deal with. And, this racial reckoning that really was ignited in May of 2020, where a lot more people in the world became conscious of, what's happening for communities of color with violence that was sparked by murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. And I'm wondering for you if there were things you observed or activities that happened by artists, by organizations that you felt were, examples of innovation in terms of activism on this topic at that time. And I'm going to start with Tommy.
Sorry, maybe start with someone else. I just need a second to think about.
Oh, yeah,
about
sure.
That process.
All right, then Leslie, it's on you.
Okay. That just made me laugh because that's been half of our existence. You're on mute. Sorry. So I did do a project with a bassist named Jordan Davis. That was her original composition to honor Breonna Taylor. It was very cool, and I was really happy to be a part of it. I was thinking about this too. I personally didn't compose anything or do any particular art for what was happening, but I did Facebook discussions where people came together and we talked. And there were several of us. We even had, some people join the conversation who were invited. One of the ladies, it was her great uncle who, has lived through decades of policy change, and he's seen, the edge of mass lynchings, and he had a lot of good information for us. So for me, that was part of the healing. It's like for a woman who is Black and also being a woman, seeing these repeated stories of all these abuses can just make you angry. It festers. And you start to feel resentful towards people for just looking the way they look. And that's the truth. When someone asks you just that one more stupid question, like, did you shower, and you're Black, or, how did you get into that school? Or, whatever number of things they say, my best friends are Black, you get pissed, like you're tired of it. And so for me, I had conversations with people. We talked about it, just like late at night on Facebook, sometimes for hours, discussing these things and recommending books, recommending, YouTube videos, or that was my way of coping with it. Obviously, I haven't gotten over it or anything, but that was helpful for me, just having that outlet.
That's great. Elena, what about you? Because for me as a Black American woman, it was really interesting to see the protests that were happening worldwide at this time. It really just, it helped my heart in a lot of ways, but I'm wondering for you, what did you see during the time?
There was, I would say, obviously a big response here as well in the UK. To be totally honest, I feel like the organizations that whose responses I was most impressed by were organizations that had been doing the work already anyway, that weren't just popping up to say want to participate now too. But that being said, I mean, I tend to try and be as positive as I can about these things. I know like a lot of people asked a lot of stupid questions, and obviously I'm in a kind of weird place to comment because I'm not Black, I'm Mexican, and you know that's a whole different can of worms. And like being sort of ethnically ambiguous person, I feel like I occupy some gray spaces that make me both qualified and very unqualified to talk about these things. So just, you know, try and do my best. But I also, just because it's sort of the way I operate, try and stay as positive as I can. And I think even if, like, you know, an organization programming Florence Price in response to these things seems stupid, I think it's like a little bit better than not programming Florence Price. And, you know, I think of, I'm talking, of course, in this very limited section of life, which is classical music. But to me, like trying and trying to be open-hearted and asking some questions, even if they're not, you know, perfectly phrased, I think that by and large is preferable to not. And I don't know if I'm answering this at all. I think I'm kind of bungling it, to be honest. But yeah, to answer the actual question, I think that the organizations that have already been doing the work, such as, you know, Sphinx and Project 440 and, you know, countless others, music masters here in London. Yeah, I think like a lot of people look to them as examples, and they were able to say like, yeah, we've been doing this for a while, so here's some helpful tips.
Yeah, I think that's a really good reminder for us when we are sort of trying to figure these things out and figure out how to respond, to look to those organizations who've always done it. So, you know, I'm glad you also shouted out some organizations that people can look up. So that's really helpful. Thanks. Tommy, what about you?
So yeah, I mean, I speak from sort of Elena's position as well. Just, you know, I feel like I am sort of an observer in a certain sense of, you know, an observer, but also like directly but indirectly involved with everything that's going on. And you know, as far as the work that, you know, I've been trying to do as far as educating myself, you know, there's podcasts. I mean, there's like just being open to how everyone is really feeling, right? Like how everyone is really, like, just day by day. And that's just so important as a human being, as an artist, to like absorb all of these things, because it does influence what you do on a day-to-day basis as, you know, a person educating yourself, as an artist, like going forward. And for me, most of my experience in the last, you know, several months has been through this commissioning that I've been doing, is understanding how the experience is from that perspective. And, you know, there's just a lot in that realm that I feel like I've been sort of cultivating and trying to understand, to wrap my mind around through, you know, people like Jesse Montgomery, people like Carlos Simon, like doing these incredible, making this music and having sort of me be the conduit, but also not just a conduit, but someone who is trying to wrap their mind around that experience to properly portray what is happening. And in order for me to do that, I have to, like anyone, you have to be in the mind of the composer. You have to sort of commit yourself to I'm going to be in their shoes. And I'm still in that process as far as learning this music and putting myself in that position, as I'm sure, you know, everyone here does, and a lot of people do that are listening. Like you have to put your mind into it. And so I'm in that process.
Yeah. To all of you, and I'm going to start with this question just to Leslie. You know, Leslie, you've talked about the concerts you've done in your neighborhood and online. Tommy, you've talked about the commissioning. And Tommy, I'm loving all of the cello technique videos on Instagram. Like, you totally have a future as a comedian if the whole cello thing doesn't work out. And Elena, you talked about the Urioste jukebox, which 88 days. Wow. But, how, in addition to those projects, how have you all really been remaining engaged to your audience during this time? Leslie,
Yeah.
start with you.
So the projects really forced me to like figure out like who is my audience, you know, getting out there and kind of like selling yourself is something that musicians hate, like most of us avoid any kind of job where we have to sell something because like we just want to practice and then perform. um so I've been doing a lot of online things. It's just been very online present, forcing myself to post. Like I got a loop pedal over last summer, and I post loops for my students to use to improvise over. They're part of my audience, and just engaging with my neighbors and friends and family about upcoming things I want to do, asking them what they'd like to hear, what kind of music they want. Um, I'm actually planning to get into the studio and do some recording. So just frequently reaching out to people, asking for things. So like Elena mentioned that, having to open my mouth and ask for space or ask for time or ask for something. That's really hard. I don't think I realized how hard that was. I'll just share this really quick story because it's kind of funny. Like when I did the last concert, I charged in advance. Usually I just did the concert and like people would just pay what they want to pay, which works well. That was kind of surprising because I thought people would be like, I'm not paying. I get like $5. But I was at the gym, and anybody who knows me, they know I frequent the gym, and I see the same people in the gym every time. And I had this long conversation in my head, like, invite them to your concert, Leslie. Invite them. Okay, I'm gonna do it. I'm jump roping. They're walking by. They're about to leave. You should ask them to come to attend the concert. No, 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 no. Okay. I'm jump roping. And finally, I walk up and I'm like, hey, if you're not busy, this Sunday, I'm doing a concert online. Would you like to attend? The guy's like, sure. He buys a ticket like, in 2 minutes. But the agony that happened in my head before I actually asked that question was really dramatic, So I feel like for me, like that engaging part, like actually physically going and like talking to people or actually following up and making the phone calls, like that's the important thing. Like I can't just sit behind a computer and just make a Facebook event and just expect for the rest to happen. I have to physically make contact with my neighbors, with my family, friends, with organizers at different venues, and that's been a challenge. And just I've had people now reach out and say, okay, when's the next concert? So that means I'm in a sweet spot. So I need to like plan the next concert. So yeah, that's basically what I've been doing to engage.
I love it. Elena, what about you?
I have, like Leslie and Tommy, I've been trying to stay active, just in, what I can offer in terms of my yoga program with Melissa White, who I'm sure many of you know. We just keep trying to think of like new ways to interact with people, whether they're group classes or personal sessions, just like however we can help, we want to help. In terms of specific ways I've been engaging, something that I learned actually from the Urioste Jukebox video project with my husband is that it seemed like a lot of people were more responsive, sort of the more, I'm so allergic to this word, but authentic we were, both on the sillier side of the spectrum and the more vulnerable. So we dressed up in ridiculous costumes, played absolutely absurd medleys of like 80s music and things that you probably wouldn't think you wanted to hear on the violin and piano, and kazoo. So we definitely allowed ourselves to be quite silly and not, like classical musicians, which felt really fun and natural for us. And I think a lot of people responded to that. But also we made a point each day when we would post these videos, we would write something about it. And Tom, my husband, was really good about providing historical background and context. And I tended to write a lot about how I was feeling on any given day, which was admittedly not always positive. Like there were some days where I threw a tantrum before recording or just like melted down in tears, or my parents who we were living with having a fight and it was making me feel awful. So I that sort of seeped its way into this project, and that combined with other, little Instagram posts or stories I would do just about my actual emotions really seemed to resonate with people. So I've really found that for me personally, people are quite responsive when I find ways of being honest. And I'm definitely not advocating or like excusing in myself, being whiny or complaining, because I know I have tons to be grateful for, and I am. But I think that people deserve to know that being an artist is quite challenging, and art doesn't just happen. Like there's like quite a lot that goes into this, the alchemy of coming out with a video or a concert or a commission. Like a lot has to happen, and I think I really enjoy engaging with people in a way that's as gracefully honest as I can muster. I found that's been, and it opens up some really wonderful conversations with people in all stages of music making. I think it's helpful for music students coming up in the world to see that, people they might look to for advice don't have the answers. I think we all kind of assume that everyone else has it all figured out, and just getting into conversations where we realize, like, actually none of us has it figured out. We're just, this is how we faked it today. I found it really helpful to be on the giving and receiving end of that.
I love that. And y'all really did have a lot of costumes in your 88 days. I was thinking your closet must be huge.
No, it's because we were at my parents' house, which has served as a dumping ground for all my old clothes, like Jessica McClintock gowns and all. So
perfect. Tommy, what about you?
That is so funny. Those were really great. Yeah, so I mean, I guess like what I connect with what Elena was just saying was like, when things come, you're engaging with your audience through the most basic platform, which is just, who am I? Like, what can I give today? Like, without being anything more than what you are, like, because there's a lot of that, especially on social media, because it's just a snapshot of, like, I mean, I'm addressing it through social media because you're sort of talking about engaging. And so that was my first thought. But yeah, I mean, it's, it's hard to, this is a snapshot of you and what you have to give. And like, someone's there just like, why do I got to press this right now? And then they do, and then they're expecting stuff. Like, it's just there. And it's hard to be meeting those expectations when you have, people who are like, they love what you do and then like, do more. And you're like, ah. So it's tough. Like, these teaching videos are fun, but I only make them like infrequently. Like, I'll go through a period where I'll like make them like 5 days in a row. And then I'm like, I'm done. Like, I can't do any more. And it's really just because like I'm maybe practicing more often in those days, and I'm like preparing for a virtual concert. So I'm like, okay, like I'm working on this little bow thing. I feel like this is what I need to do here. This is what I need to do there. Like, oh wait, I'm like too close to the bridge. Like, how can I give that to people? How can I give my learning experience to people who want that sort of like motivation during this time and the practicing? And so really the root of that though is having the virtual concerts sort of like in the back burner, just like sort of happening, and me putting in like, I don't know, like 90% effort just cause like, pandemic. I'm just like feeling like if I have that educational experience, then I might as well try and like give that. So that's what I've been doing as far as engaging. Oh, and yeah, and I guess like it's made me sort of also figure out like, okay, like people really do like seeing like the other stuff. Like, yeah, you need to show the other stuff, like not just music. So
I love that. And you just gave me a sweet segue to and kind of the next question. Just, talking to teachers, talking to students, talking to parents, anecdotally, virtual school has been really, really hard for everyone involved. And I feel as though music learning, music education is a completely different animal where, there's deep engagement involved. There's a lot of practice, a lot of study with instruments, especially, working directly with a student in a room. Nothing will replace that. But I know that you've all had to adapt and figure out ways to make it work in this virtual realm. So Leslie, I'm starting with you, and I'm just curious from your experience as an educator, how have you navigated that? Have you seen really amazing examples of people who are figuring something out, just to make sure our students are still able to learn and also just come out of this hole at the same time? We'd love to hear that.
I have found it both challenging and surprisingly rewarding to teach online. Some students are doing very well, they're really thriving. But I've really tried to focus more on overall musicianship with students right now because I know that it's really hard to get nitpicky about technique when you can't be, for me at least, in the space with them. Trying to explain mechanical things is tricky, especially with smaller kids. But I've literally like taken music, put it on, and like, we're gonna practice rhythms today and we're gonna move, put on some James Brown or whatever. And we're like, okay, quarter notes, let's go, eighth notes. And like you'd be surprised, like they love it because they haven't moved all day. They've just been sitting in one spot, that gets them feeling good. Everybody's comfortable. Then you can kind of get into the heavier stuff. Okay, now let's talk about your posture. Let's talk about intonation. I've also been using my loop pedal a lot. So if I want them to work on rhythms on open strings, I'll create a loop that can include all the sound, like that would have chords that would fit over all open strings. And that gives me a lot. And then the kids who maybe don't have their instruments tuned, because that's a whole nother tuning. I've been trying to teach people to tune, having parents tune instruments online. But I'll have them sing, and we'll sing open strings over the loop. And then we do things like, come up with a rhyme on your open strings and share it with us, and then we'll all repeat it back to this loop. Or, make up your own rhythm and add body, mechanic, rhythm with it. And so there's like lots of things. I'm just trying really hard to not do like the thing that they're getting all day, where I talk a whole bunch and they sit there. Because the kids, they're funny because they'll do things like put filters on their face while you're talking. They'll be putting like a pizza hat on their face and like whiskers, or they keep changing their names. So like if you look on their names, like one had like turned up, or posted up, or like whatever, crewmates. They're finding ways to like make this palatable for themselves. Then you got the kids who have like 4 other kids in their house who are on the internet, and every time they unmute, it's la 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 la. So you got to like kind of work around like and sort of be perceptive about, okay, this kid's not ready to unmute, so let's move on to something else. But yeah, I've just been trying to get them to move and sing and dance. We've been doing a lot of like learning about music history. We've been watching the Samuel Coolidge Taylor documentary, and it's hilarious. I told him about how he was like a lot of composers who sold their work for like a one-time fee, and how Hiawatha got like thousands of copies made, and they just couldn't get over it. Wait a minute, so you're telling me he only got like $15, and then somebody else made thousands of dollars? Like I was like, yes, take it as a lesson. Like this is something that you can take. But like they got like fixated on that, but they've been enjoying learning about composers and learning about different music and just spending a lot of time on musicianship. So it's been cool. I mean, we make it work. I can't lie, it's not always fun. Like Zoom
Yeah.
teaching, something else.
Yeah, I was thinking, because with my work at the Kennedy Center, we do a lot of career development programs for young musicians and singers with National Symphony and Washington National Opera. So people who really want to achieve this, and as a way of, not necessarily giving them what they have when they're at school all day, we realized that we could bring in people virtually that we might not be able to fly into DC to work with them. So we had Elena and Melissa do a yoga class for our youth fellowship program. And, that was probably something we wouldn't be able to do, or have, Marion Alsop talk to our orchestra kids about citizen artistry and how that's important to the work. And that might've been something we weren't able to do. So yeah, I'm so happy to hear when I hear stories of educators that are really just trying to take advantage of this and know that it's not normal and it's not going to be the classroom. So what can we do to really change it up? I want to ask one final question to the group really quick so we can get into the Q&A, and I encourage the audience to begin getting questions in the chat, although I'm sure you already are. And new normal, unprecedented times, we've heard it, all the phrases. But this is what you've all shown, is that even with all of these challenges, there is this ability to still create and be creative and have community. So right now, Elena, Leslie, Tommy, you're talking to SphinxConnect. What is the thing that one thing that you want to urge our field artists and everyone who's connected that we take into this next stage of our new normal? Start with Tommy.
It sort of harks back to our 4 questions ago, which is that just keep the freedom going, and to keep and keep that sort of like drive and passion for, going crazy, like, and things that like you would never normally do. Like, I mean, obviously, like, people aren't gonna, program certain, like, they're not gonna, I don't know, like, certain like pop songs, like on a series, but like there's certain things that, who knows, but like there's certain things, not that you'd want it, but anyways, there's certain things that, I feel like there's a freedom and there's a tone that has been set, that there's a lot of positive things going on as far as like just the creation and the freedom of that. So I don't know, I would love to see more of that, sort of like Elena saying. And yeah, I mean, I hope, well, I hope things, first of all, I hope things are normal soon as far as like being in a concert hall. And if that's the case, I hope that there's not like a return to what we knew. You know what I mean? Like, or I hope there's not just like a sort of status quo, and I hope that there's like a sort of tone change. So that's what I hope.
Cool. What about you, Elena?
Yeah, I would say as much as possible, avoid this feeling that we're beholden to other people. And actually, I just wanted to touch on this, Leslie. I think like the fact actually that I've been a soloist and a chamber musician my whole life, in some ways it hasn't made me any less beholden to other people, be them presenters or venues, promoters, managers. Basically, until a couple years ago, I felt like my whole life was sort of steered by other people, and the only thing I could do was say yes or no. It wasn't until Melissa and I decided to form Intermission that we realized sort of our own creative juices, and we were going to build this thing from the ground up, no compromises. We just wanted it how we wanted it, and that's how it was going to be. And I think actually once we did that, it set the foundation for anything. I mean, that sort of gave me the inspiration to start my own festival, for me to like take a chance on these ridiculous videos, just found a chamber collective here in London. I think just once you do it the first time, just do a thing. It doesn't even have to be a big thing. And honestly, if you tell people that you're doing a thing, then you're doing a thing. Just craft something of your own, and I think I used the metaphor, it's like flexing a muscle. It gets easier, then that will make you want to do this thing, and combine your interests, and just, yeah, don't feel like you have to ask permission. If you think it's a good idea, then it's a good idea.
Great. Lovely. Thank you. Leslie, what about you?
I know we have a question in there. I'd say learn some technology. Get to know some technology and some apps, because you're going to get left behind if you don't. Yeah. It's super necessary. And figure out how to use some equipment for sound and things, because we don't know how long we're going to be at home working. So it's useful to invest in your home office / studio / life. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's true. And also make sure your mom turns the ringer off the phone in the house before you go into a panel discussion at a conference. Important lesson. So questions from the audience. Hello, what experience, classes, programs, if any, do you feel were helpful in nurturing your innovation chops when you were in school conservatory? I'll let you choose if you want to take that one first.
I'll answer that, because school did nothing for me when it comes to that. I'm older, I think, than everybody else on this call, but we didn't talk about, there was never any education on our careers and how to navigate them if we didn't get an orchestra job. So, but for me, what's given me, first, I think I'm kind of a quick on my feet kind of person in general, but I attend like ASTA every year. I try and get into spaces with people who are always talking about how they're improving themselves. So like I did Christian House's string boot camp this past year. And he's like the hardest hustler I've ever met. Like he works so many angles. He has so many great ideas, and he has these forums where they discuss things. So I think relying on your institution for this information may not be good, but maybe currently it is. I don't know. I'm oldish, so I don't know. But I think there's a lot of people out here who are posting content about ways you can innovate as an artist. It's pretty much free, like on YouTube all the time. So I'd say lock into that stuff more.
Any additional answers to that, or should we get to the next question?
I had one little thing. I also didn't really learn that much from my school, like lovely as it was, is quite old fashioned. But I did actually receive it wasn't even advice, it was a question from a fellow classmate and friend that has lingered with me for years and years, which is what's the one thing that only you can do? And this is like the advice that I pass on to any students or really on any panel, because it's something that will change or shift as you go through your life. But I think it's a really, really valuable one. And again, it proves the point that we needn't only follow the paths that have been made available to us. Sometimes, like, the world doesn't know it needs a thing until you provide that thing, because it's, the thing that you can do. And it might be a combination of your passions or, a totally new idea altogether. But I think that's like a good thing to meditate on from time to time.
Great. I'm going to put these two questions together because I think they kind of work. There's a continuum there. So one question was, what's one thing a musician could do to begin to build a paying online audience for their work? But then the next question that was shared that I thought was an interesting arc is, could you share how to work through streaming fatigue? So yes, you want to build an online audience, but audiences are definitely getting a little tired of streaming. But who knows when we'll be back in the concert hall. Who wants to take that one?
I can't say I've made bank on all the concerts that I've done, but they've done well. I think one way is to make it easy for people. Like, you don't want to create too many steps because, the internet is filled with distractions. So if someone's going on to buy a ticket for your concert or register for your concert, they're going to probably click on 3 more things before they actually click on your thing. So find ways to pick a platform and pick an easy platform for people to do. This last time I did a concert, I registered people myself. So my brother created a website for the concert. And when they bought their ticket for the concert, I registered them. So all they had to do on the day of the concert is just click on the link, and that's it. So I think what I've seen is that people are also, the fatigue is for the audience as well. And you want to just make it as easy as possible. I also think, too, if it's possible to get some live people in the room with you when you do your concert, that's another great way to keep yourself from feeling that fatigue. Like doing it with two of my concerts I did with my neighbors watching while I streamed. And it felt so much more natural and so much easier. But I also think you need to name your price. And like Elena said, know your worth and stick with it. Don't worry. If this concert you don't get a lot of people, don't worry about it. Stick to what you believe you're worth. Don't compromise that, because you really can't control for some things, but you can kind of stick to what you feel like you're worth, and don't be apologetic about it.
I'll just add one thing to the whole, because it's been on your mind, as far as how, do I do this? And if I do it, what do I charge? Should I charge a specific thing? Should I do suggested? I've been sort of, in agreement or in argument with some organizations that are very intense about okay, we need to charge just $10 and that's the ticket price. I found, so my best friend is an organist in Madison, and he curates this organ series there during the year, in normal pre-COVID. And they had this, they decided to do an organ series, and they had a suggested donation, but they just gave a sort of pay as you wish option. And they made $30,000 from one concert, because a bunch of people they were just oh, we're not going to do suggested. We're going to do we're going to give 100 just because these are the times, And I don't know, there's something to that, which is I don't know, if you're talking about the nitty gritty, what do I charge? I found that really fascinating, that you can use that as more of a, because the way the question was worded was paying audience, right? So yeah. That's just a little thing that came to my mind.
I've done both, and they both do well. But the thing with like having a tier of prices. Like you can actually offer something with, like I did a free digital download with the more expensive price for my last concert, which
That's
helped.
great.
Yeah.
Great. And I fear that we have run out of time, but I just want to thank Elena and Leslie and Tommy once again, and thanks to the Sphinx organization for having us here at SphinxConnect. There's information I know about all of the speakers here, so find us on social media. They're all really fun on social media. But just thank you for having us and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.